Welcome to the Small Scape. Today we are looking at one tank in particular that I find myself looking at because of the plants that are in here and the tiny little occupants. And I think they work perfectly for very tiny little inhabitants. In this tank we have Chili and Mira rasboras, and then we also have just a few of the Gertrude rainbow, which is an amazingly adorable fish. I've also got some of my pumpkin shrimp, which are so much fun to watch. But with these tiny little inhabitants, you will see a lot of photobombing, by the way. There's a lot of plants that I think you should take note of. Namely, I'm just going to get the elephant in the room out of the way, and that's duckweed. That's what you see floating at the top of the tank there, and it's cute, it's tiny. Everybody that goes into the hobby probably likes it at first, but it grows very, very quickly. So don't get it if you don't want a lot of it. One of the cutest plants that you can get for tiny, tiny little fish is Hydrocal. It really strikes me as kind of like a little ivy. It has a very tiny little leaf and it grows. It'll kind of mound itself. It will trail, and it's just such a fun little plant. It's really great for kind of like a little foresty scape, anything. And I like it specifically with these Gertrude rainbows. Why? I just find it kind of a magical little combination. And then at the top of the tank you will see a mass of kind of grassy textured, and it's not supposed to be there, but it's microsword. I love microsword, and it's actually doing great sitting at the top there. Normally you plant it. I do have hacks for planting it because it can be a little bit of a stinker, but I just don't think you can beat the grassy little texture if you have tiny little inhabitants. Now, another one of my favorite plants to put in a tiny tank, especially one that you want to have some sort of little magical qualities, that would be Beuse, or if you pronounce it Beuse, it's Beuse Fandra. It comes in so many different varieties and with different kind of colors, but that iridescence that you can see on the leaves is completely unique to this plant. They are so much fun. I think wavy green is probably my favorite, but there's Cryptocarini. There's so many different varieties with slight different shades. You can see that kind of like a purpley green. There's like a bright spring green in some of the varieties, but it is such an adorable little plant. You can attach it, you can wedge it. It does not have to be planted. It's just like Anubius, and I just don't think you can beat it if you have a small tank, and especially if you have tiny little inhabitants, because the scale will match perfectly with your little guys swimming all around the tank. Another great plant are the mosses. There are so many different kind of mosses. Java moss is usually my favorite, but there's Willow Moss, and they come with different kind of little shapes. Their leaves kind of branch out in different patterns, but in this tank, this moss is very, very happy, and I think it's just so much fun. It adds a lot to the bottom of the tank, and it will creep along driftwood. It will wrap itself around other plants, of course. It can get a little untidy, but in this tank specifically, it's just super fun, kind of hanging around at the bottom of the tank and crawling up the side. Those little tiny fronds are so tiny, you just can't beat it, and just an adorable little plant. And it's pretty much known as the easiest types of plants to grow. I have Java moss in a little glass jar that sits on my windowsill. It's been there forever, and it's doing just great with no help whatsoever. It's just great little aquatic plant. So if you are new to aquatic plants, definitely try the mosses because they are super easy. Now, another one that I'd like to mention is the Rotala, and I believe this is the Rotala Rotundifolia, and this would have grown from a tissue culture that I would have gotten at a big box store, probably Petco or PetSmart, and they can be super tiny when you get them, which for a bigger tank, you're gonna have to wait a long time to see any kind of growth. But that's another fun thing. If you have a small tank, and this is an 8.5 gallon, and you get some tissue cultures, you can really enjoy them being on the very tiny little side, and then you can enjoy them as they grow. Super fun, and definitely a great use of those tiny tissue cultures. Now, even for smaller tanks, I will add a couple of my favorite plants that have a little bit of a larger scale. The first one is crypts. You cannot go wrong with any kind of crypts. That's short for Cryptocarini, and there's so many different varieties also that come in different colors, from like a bronze to a like a more like a brownish color to a purpley sort of color, and they're just so much fun. You'll see these scattered throughout this tank, and pretty much every single tank we have in the fish room will house a crypt, and some of them have more of like a wavy texture. They can get quite large, so plan to possibly have to pull them out and place them in other tanks if they do get too large, but they can really fill in and be really great for filling up your tank. And I think it's just a fun texture to have, and even when you have tiny little inhabitants and you get some fun tiny little plants, I think it's great to kind of show that contrast and really highlight how tiny some of these other plants are with getting something that have longer leaves like the crypts. When they're babies, they're going to shoot out runners underneath the substrate, which can be really fun. And last of all, but definitely not least, is my favorite aquatic plant, and that's Anubius. Anubius is well known as a very great beginner plant, but everybody from beginner to intermediate to advanced still uses Anubius. I think it's really fun contrasting also with these tiny little plants because of the big bold leaf that it has, and they're very hardy, and you can divide them very simply by cutting that wider part of the stem that was what's known as the rhizome, and you can make multiple plants very easy. But I think it's just a fun little plant, and especially if you have higher flow, especially towards the top of the tank, I think you can definitely use Anubius to maybe block that flow or just have it kind of hanging out around there. It along with a lot of these other plants, it will grow immersed as well, which can be super fun. But I hope you enjoyed this little tour around this tiny little tank. I am very, very much looking forward to doing a rescape, I think, in this tank. And it's going to revolve completely around the Gertrude rainbow, which has totally inspired me for a very specific scape. Looking forward to it, where I'm going to be using a lot of these plants. So let me know if you have any experience with these, what your thoughts are, and I will see you in the next one.